I mean, it's so tough, but you have to expect it. If you're in jiu-jitsu or if you're in martial arts, injuries are part of the sport.
All right, I'm here with Tim Welch, Red Hawk, Sugar Sean's head coach, and the best coach in MMA right now. So, Red Hawk's been taking the MMA world by storm in the last few months. What has this recent surge in popularity for you been like?
I mean, I've seen this happen to different coaches before. Their guys are winning. They're getting called the best minds. They're all this stuff, and then their guys go on a little losing streak, and it goes downhill. So I try not to really focus on that too much. Really, what I try to focus on though is just improving.
Yeah,
Just improving everywhere, improving my health, improving being a leader, because that's a whole job in itself, and improving my jujitsu and improving everywhere. I just got to keep learning and improving, and I can't go wrong with that, I think.
yeah, that's a perfect mindset to have, especially when if stuff starts to get messy, then you're still improving and you got that good mindset going. So I mean, one of the biggest things probably that people notice right off the bat is your relationship with Sean. It's a lot different from most head coaches with their athletes. What do you think makes your relationship with Sean as a coach special compared to other relationships there?
Probably just the trust he has in me. He knows I truly want what's best for him, and when I say something, he takes it to heart. And he, growing up as a kid, he's never been good with like someone telling him, like a teacher or a coach. He's never been good with someone telling him what to do. So me and him developing our friendship and him being able to trust me and just actually knowing him. And we grew up a lot together.
Mhm.
Through our 20s, we were living together a lot, and we grew up together and grew a lot. And I don't have kids, and I don't have a huge MMA team right now. So a lot of my focus is kind of I focus on him. I could study a lot of film. I could do a lot of things because I don't have a full MMA team to coach, or I don't have another full-time job, or I don't have 3 or 4 kids. I have a lot of time to focus.
Yeah, and I think we see that, especially like with that relationship and the trust, it makes a lot of sense because some guys maybe even during fights, like they're fighting and they start freaking out and losing their mind, and then their coach is saying something, and it's probably hard for them to listen to it at certain points if they don't have that trust and that close relationship. So the fact that he knows that you're on his side no matter what, and you're definitely not just like in it for the money, like maybe some other coaches might be, that probably helps a lot for sure.
Yeah, and you see it all the time, even in the UFC. These guys are sprinting in there into the between rounds, and they're just yelling a bunch of random
Yeah.
stuff. And it's like that fighter is supposed to take that in. That's the biggest moment of his life at that point. And that coach is in there panicked, yelling all this random stuff. And it's just it's a tough spot that I see a lot of fighters in, that they don't have a corner that they can probably really trust.
Yeah. So Sean's upcoming fight is his first 5 round fight in the UFC against Aljamain Sterling. So what is the biggest change that you're instilling in this camp and maybe in his strength and conditioning regimen as well, without giving too much away there?
We just start fight camp a lot earlier. We start around 8 weeks out. This time we started a good solid 10, 11 weeks out, just starting getting his body in shape, start getting it ready for the extra 10 minutes. 25 minutes is a long time, especially with Aljo. We don't really know how he's going to come out. With some people, he's came out and bounced around side to side, but we're expecting him to come out a lot like he did against Corey Sandhagen.
Yeah.
So you can try to pace yourself all you want, but at the end of the day, we have to match Aljo's pace. If he comes out there and sprints at him, we have to be ready for that. And then also, I know Sean's going to hurt Aljo. At some point in
Yeah.
the fight, he's going to hurt Aljo, and he's going to rock him and wobble his knees. And that's where a mistake a lot of fighters make is in those long fights, they hurt someone and then they really empty their gas tank trying to put them away. And it really screws them over for the later rounds, third, fourth, fifth round. So always instilling it in his mind. And we've done that his whole career. Once you hurt him, just to stay composed and stay sharp.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In the bantamweight division, it's kind of one of the biggest like signs of the new era of MMA and MMA fighters there, like with Corey, Aljo, Sean, Marab, even. What would you say the biggest difference in MMA is now compared to maybe when you were fighting? And what changes would coaches and athletes from that time have to make to succeed now?
Uh, I mean, the UFC, I don't know if this is really part of your question, but the UFC takes a lot better care of you now. Now you can weigh in 9 a.m., so you have a lot longer to rehydrate. Before, they would literally not let you weigh in until 24 hours before the event started. So
Mm.
most people would be still dehydrated really bad on the day of their fight. And now the UFC takes care of you with supplements. They take care of you with meal plans. You always have access to the smart nutritionists. You have access to physical therapists. You have a lot more access, and the UFC takes care of the fighters a lot more
Yeah.
in this present day than they did even 5-6 years ago. It was a lot different.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's a lot new research on recovery, nutrition, training plans, strength and conditioning, all that kind of stuff, which helps as well for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
the UFC PI and all the coaches there, that kind of really changes the game quite a bit.
yeah, for sure. So I mean, moving on from that, looking ahead, what do you think MMA looks like 5 years down the line from now?
5 years down the line, kids will be in the UFC a lot younger. I mean, right now you don't see many 19, 20-year olds in the UFC, but now kids are getting good instruction and they're joining really good schools when they're 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
And so you'll see a lot more kids, younger kids, 18, 19, 20. You'll see a lot more of them in the UFC and developing in the UFC, similar to Max Holloway and that little Raul Rosas. That's what I see changing a lot.
Yeah. Even through Sanabul, like we have a lot of young athletes that we send gear to, and they'll post like tournament clips, and we see 6 or 7 year olds just pulling off the craziest stuff. And I'm sure you see it in your gym too. And it's just so fast and technical. It's pretty sweet to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the young kids with quality trainers at that age, I mean, they're going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, moving like kind of on from that as well, if you were to build a perfect fighter from a young age, how would you prioritize each martial art? Maybe say for exact like time spent on each one.
Yeah, well, depending on their background, if it's ground zero though, they have to get started on their grappling early. The wrestling and the jiu-jitsu, it takes so long to develop. You can be doing it almost every day for 2 years and you're going to be a decent blue belt. 2 years you can
Yeah.
develop pretty far in striking. You can learn quite a bit and be pretty proficient in striking.
Mhm.
So early on, the grappler is always going to be able to kind of dictate where the fight goes. And if your base is grappling and you really have good wrestling and you have really good jiu-jitsu, then you can be more reckless on your feet and take more chances on your feet,
Mhm.
knowing that if you get put in a bad position, that you're super confident you can get out. Instead of starting with striking, now you're worried about this guy taking you down the whole fight and
Yeah.
you're stressing about it. So you don't
Yeah.
really let your hands go. And then maybe they start changing levels and you got to respect their takedown. Now they're punching you off the takedown. So definitely starting with the grappling early on in the career and then
Yeah.
moving toward, for me, my style, I think I'd like to move towards a little bit more boxing and then some kickboxing.
Sweet. Yeah, that makes sense. We even saw that with like the Khabib Connor fight when Khabib knocked Connor down. But we obviously know the levels there when it comes to striking, but you just saw his level change and then he came over top of the right hand and just knocked him down. So the grappling really just adds a massive element there for sure.
Yeah, and not even getting taken down. But if you've started as a striker and you're going against someone who was raised in wrestling and they were raised in jiu-jitsu, their muscles are super conditioned for that.
Mhm.
And any striker knows how tiring just one wrestling scramble can make you, and it can really take a lot of the pop from your punches. So I think grappling early on is very important.
Yeah, for sure. Sweet. In a sport as physically demanding as either jujitsu or MMA, as a coach, how do you balance pushing your athletes to their limits day in and day out and recovery and preventing overtraining?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning when you first meet someone, you got to kind of get to know your athlete. You got to get in practices sometimes where you push them to their breaking point and kind of see where they break at. But I've been to a lot of different fight camps and I've been around a lot of different champions and see how they train and see how far they can push themselves and see how they handle themselves. Um, so really just really learning the athlete. Every fighter, every person is going to be a little bit more durable or a little bit less durable. Some are going to be really slow twitch muscle. Some will be really fast twitch muscle. So just really figuring out your athlete and learning about them physically and kind of learning about what goes through their mind.
Yep. Sweet. So when an athlete does get injured, maybe not inevitably, but most of the time they're going to get injured at some point or hurt even. What is your best advice for them during that time period where they're just mentally exhausted and kind of like just itching to get back into it? but they still want to improve. So what would your advice be for that?
I mean, it's so tough, but you have to expect it. If you're in jiu-jitsu or if you're in martial arts, injuries are part of the sport. If you go
Mhm.
through a 10-year, 15-year career without getting injured, I don't think that'll ever happen in the history of
Yeah.
sports. So you have to, when you do get hurt, you have to bring that same work ethic you have towards MMA or towards your sport and bring it into your rehab, and maybe study what's the best way to rehab, figure out a good rehab protocol and really focus on that. Because a lot of the rehab for most injuries is super boring. You're not pushing yourself a lot, but
Mhm.
you have to stay focused and bring that work ethic to recovery. and and fighting and MMA and these kind of sports are so much of mental sports, so they're probably 80% mental or more.
Mhm.
So that's a good time to read books, read some different books and strengthen your mind and start learning about what other champions did. There's books out from Mark Hunt, there's GSP, Michael Bisping, guys that have been through it all, so you can
Mhm.
read those kind of books and see what kind of experiences they went through, and just try not to be too down on yourself. There's two different type of athletes that get hurt, they get addicted to pain pills, weed,
Yeah.
start feeling sorry for themselves, and they just start declining. Or there's
Mhm.
athletes that really love the sport, they'll study it, they'll read books, they'll start eating healthy, and they'll just still level up as humans even though they're injured.
Yeah, for sure. So if you had a fighter starting out at the gym, or maybe even a fighter who's been doing it for a while, or a jiu-jitsu athlete, and they panic often, or they get into those high pressure moments, and in the gym they're doing perfect, but they get into those high pressure
Mhm.
situations and they start freaking out. Is there specific mental strategies or techniques that you go through or work on with those athletes to kind of make them better at dealing with that pressure?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to encourage people to learn to meditate. I know it
Mhm.
sounds cheesy and all that stuff, but when you know how to meditate and you start to get decent at meditation, no matter where you're at, no matter how hard the situation, you can follow your breath and bring yourself back into that present moment. And that's
Mhm.
the hardest thing about fighting is there's so much pressure on these people. The family's watching, there's a crowd, there's lights, there's all this stuff going on. So
Mhm.
being able to get in there and focus on where you're at, focus on being present and focus on your techniques. Um, really trying to get them to focus on what they can control, because there's so much random stuff that can
Yeah.
happen in a fight. You'll drive yourself crazy thinking about it all. But if you can just focus on what you can control, um, I mean, that's it. But also, really, ultimately, you can be the best meditator in the world, but if you don't put in the hard work, you're still going to get your ass whooped. So being
Yeah.
prepared,
For sure.
pushing yourself in practice, putting yourself in really bad places in practice, getting in practice, getting in spots where it goes through your mind wanting to give up, and then being
Yeah.
able to counter that and come back. So when you're really prepared and your training was really, really hard, once the cage door locks, once the bell rings, then you're going to be comfortable doing what you do every
Mhm.
day.
Yeah. It's almost just like your muscle memory just kind of takes over, and your techniques, and they just kind of happen. You're not even thinking about it at all. But I don't think you realize that until you actually get in there, because your mind's just racing, 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 and then you get in there, like, and you just don't even think at all. It just kind of happens, which is kind of a
Yeah.
good thing. To those first few fights, an athlete has to go through that to realize that, and then they kind of get more comfortable in there because they know that at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Ultimately, it's going to come down to experience too. Just getting, it's never going to get not scary. You're going to be scared every time you get into the
Yeah.
cage. It's going to be scary every time. You're going to be having these mental battles, fight week, fight day, all the way up until the fight. You're going to be having some mental battles, but just being familiar with it, saying you've been here before. It's okay. Learn how to counter those bad thoughts and then bring yourself back in the moment.
Sweet. So I mean, kind of going off that, we've seen you review on your Patreon some of your fans' fights, including one of mine. What are the most common mistakes that you see amateurs make, both in training and or in their fights?
Um, I mean, obviously, there's just technical mistakes, boxing
Yeah.
technical mistakes, little wrestling positions or little jujitsu positions, or decision making, making the wrong decisions at the wrong time. But mostly it's the pace of the fight. You can tell when a professional comes out there and they're looking to gauge distance. You can tell when it's an amateur too, and their shoulders are really tight and they're really tense, and
Yeah.
they go out to the middle of the cage and everything's tight and tense.
And they
So
start throwing. Yeah.
it's really just the pace of the fight, but you only can really learn through that through just going through it and experiencing it.
Yeah. What about in training? Is there anything that you see kind of as you get better or as you gain more experience at training every single day that you see change in people?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. You just every time someone goes through either a competition in jiu-jitsu or a competition in MMA, the next week, the next months they come back in the room, you can tell they've already leveled up from that.
Mm-hmm.
Their training's leveled up, being able to feel those emotions and being able to feel that pressure and being able to bring it into the room and trying to mimic your training off that, it levels people up fast.
Sweet. I mean, just to kind of end it off here, we talked at the start of the interview about how the popularity has just been growing, but you guys have been doing this for so long. You guys have been putting the work in and day out, whether it goes like through the actual gym and training, fighting, podcasting, all your content that you guys have made. What do you think? Like, what would you attribute your success to most out of everything, you personally, when it comes to podcasting, when it comes to being a social media personality, when it comes to being a coach? What do you think would you would attribute that most to?
I mean, it sounds cliche again, but just being passionate about it. I wake
Mm-hmm.
up and I don't think about it because I have to think about it. I don't think about it. It's like, God, I got to go do my podcast. I got to go do this. I actually enjoy getting information for my podcast and trying to be like a personality. I really enjoy going to the gym and helping my students. I love
Yep.
going to competition training where all the black belts come and I get to watch their scrambles and I get to talk to them and we get to discuss certain different positions, and D1 wrestlers come in all the time and I get to learn different techniques from them. They've wrestled their whole lives. So just being so passionate about MMA, I really love the sport a lot. And then the content creation too, that's just a hobby I have on the side. And I think it's really fun too, because with the content, you really get out what you put in.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's not like that. In fighting, you could put in the best effort, you could have the best training camp, you could be the best athlete, and still you get knocked out 3-4 times in a row. You don't really always get what you put
Yeah.
in for fighting,
Mm-hmm.
but content you do, which is fun. And it just forces me to be creative, and it forces me to keep learning. And now I do have people that watch my podcast and stuff, so it kind of holds me accountable too.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, Red Hawk, Tim Welch, thank you so much. Good luck to the whole team, UFC 292 in Boston. And we're really grateful to have you as part of Team Sanabul. So thank you so much for this interview, and keep up the hard work.
Sweet. Thanks tons, Zach. Talk to you soon, brother.